The Spanish central government has agreed to give Catalonia greater autonomy over its taxes and fiscal policy. Why? In what way? And what does it mean for a range of people? Let's get right into it. If you're new here, my name is Jonny. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living and working here in Spain, in Madrid, for the past 4.5 years. On this channel, I cover a lot of topics related to Spain, but also generally living abroad and being a global citizen, along with investing and personal finance. So before we get into the details of exactly what has happened, I think it's important to have a bit of context as to how the Spanish tax system is set up. Now, I did a video where I talked all about how individual taxation works by autonomous community, which I'll link for you as well. But in summary, because Spain has autonomous communities that have devolved power, there is a certain level of devolution when it comes to fiscal policy and taxation. So some of it falls within the scope of the autonomous communities and some of it within the scope of the central government. So for example, part of income taxation is the responsibility of the central government, as is VAT and corporate taxation. Whereas at the autonomous community level, they also have some responsibility for taxes. So they have responsibility for the other 50% of income tax, along with their own taxes, such as wealth tax, inheritance tax, and other miscellaneous taxes like rubbish taxes, for example. So it's important to note here that 15 of Spain's 17 autonomous regions are on what's known as the general regime, the régimen general, when it comes to taxation. And 2 autonomous communities, the Basque Country and Navarra, for historical reasons, are on a separate regime which is known as the foral regime. So the difference between these two systems is essentially as follows. For the 15 of the 17 autonomous communities on the general regime, they are responsible for collecting the taxes that are within their remit, such as the ones I mentioned before. And then of the taxes that the central government collects, they essentially go into what's kind of, let's call it a common fund, essentially, which the central government then redistributes between autonomous communities to ensure that public services provided across the country in different autonomous regions of Spain are of equal level. But why would you need something like this? Well, take regions, for example, like Madrid, like Catalonia, like the Balearic Islands, which are 3 of the autonomous communities that actually are net contributors to this fund. That means of the people living in those regions who owe central government taxes, when the common fund is then redistributed across the autonomous communities, they then receive less than what has been collected in central government taxes from the people living in those regions. And then the other autonomous communities, essentially, of the people living there, when it comes to the people living in those regions paying government taxes, these regions actually get more back from the common fund from the central government than they contribute into the fund. The big standouts being regions like Extremadura and the Canary Islands, which receive 95% and 100% respectively. These regions receive almost double of what they contribute to that common fund. There are other factors that influence the distribution of this as well, such as the population, the vulnerable population in an autonomous community, kind of the size of the autonomous community, various other factors as well. So this common fund, along with what's known as the Global Sufficiency Fund, essentially ensures that every autonomous community has enough money to be able to cover its budget and fund the public services that run in that autonomous community. Now, for the 2 that aren't on this general regime, the Basque Country and Navarra, which are on what's known as the foral regime in Spanish, these autonomous communities essentially have the full oversight, control, and management of their tax system. So they collect 100% of all taxes paid by the residents living in those regions. So people paying there essentially don't pay central government tax. They pay all of their taxes, whether it's income tax, VAT, etc. They pay it to the tax authorities in those autonomous communities. What the Basque Country and Navarra then have to do is essentially make a contribution via a third entity known as a cupo in Spanish to that common fund of the central government. So whilst they have oversight and full autonomy essentially over their taxes, they still need to make some contribution to that central government fund. And the difference between these 2 systems is very key in understanding what is about to happen in Catalonia if this goes ahead. So the central government is now proposing for a written accord with one of the nationalist parties in Catalonia is a similar tax structure to what is happening in the Basque Country and in Navarra. That's essentially that Catalonia then has autonomy and control over its taxation and fiscal policy. So it essentially sees the creation of a Hacienda Catalana with the Generalitat, which is the regional government of Catalonia, essentially taking full oversight responsibility control, the management, and the collection of taxes in Catalonia. And the timing of this is expected to be around 2026, when the Generalitat would start collecting taxes, and then they would also oversee the 2025 annual tax declaration for residents in Catalonia. But in the same way that Navarra and the Basque Country contribute to the central government fund via a third entity, Catalonia would also be expected to do the same. There's a paragraph in the legislation that translates roughly to English as I'm about to read. The contribution towards solidarity must be explicit and must be reflected in a transparent way. The Generalitat must contribute towards solidarity with the other autonomous community, with the objective that the services provided by the various autonomous governments to their citizens can reach similar levels, as long as there being the other autonomous communities, fiscal efforts are similar. So in summary, Catalonia would essentially become like the Basque Country and Navarra and become fully responsible for the oversight of its taxes and fiscal policy, and would then make contributions to the central government fund via a third entity in the same way. So why is the central government doing this? Well, the answer is pretty straightforward, and it is politics. And as there is politics involved in this, I will only tell you the facts of what has happened, and then it's up to you to form an opinion. Earlier this year in May, there were regional elections in Catalonia, with the winner of the general elections being the Partido Socialista Catalana, which is basically the Catalan branch of the central government PSOE, the Socialist Workers' Party. However, they did not win an outright majority, and in order for their candidate to be inaugurated as the president of the Generalitat, they would need the support of some pro-independence parties, namely the Left Catalan Republic, Esquerra Republicana Catalana, and Together for Catalunya, Junts per Catalunya. Had they failed to secure the support of these parties, it's unlikely that Salvador Illa, the candidate, would have been inaugurated as the president of the Generalitat, and essentially would have been an electoral repetition, i.e. redoing the election. In order to gain the support, namely of Esquerra Republicana, this kind of devolution of fiscal policy and autonomy when it comes to taxation was an agreement that was made between the Socialist Workers' Party and Esquerra. And so in order to secure support for the inauguration of Salvador Illa, the Catalan Socialist Workers' Party, the PSC, made an agreement with Esquerra, the Left Catalan Republic Party, and this is kind of what was in the agreement. So as I say, politics comes into this. Again, I've given you the facts. It's up to you to decide what you make of it. That said, in order for Catalonia to leave the general regime and essentially move to the foral regime or its own autonomy, for the autonomous community financing law and for Catalonia to leave the general regime, this is going to have to go through the Spanish Congress of Deputies and be voted on, and then get majority approval in order to be passed, for the law to be modified, and then for Catalonia to have its fiscal independence. So something to keep an eye on in the meantime. So now, what are the consequences of this for various actors? Let's look at Catalonia first, and for the people living in Catalonia. I'm sure what comes to a lot of people's mind is, are people in Catalonia, are businesses going to pay more tax as a result of this? Are they going to pay less tax? Are there going to be new taxes added or taxes abolished as a result of this? Now, it's unknown what Catalonia will do with the taxation system in terms of, increase in brackets, lower in thresholds, etc., when it comes to how they'll manage this tax system. It's not really been commented on. If I were to give my thoughts, I would say at least not as a result of Catalonia having more fiscal autonomy. Because what this seems to be about is more about control over the Catalonian region's budget, how it administers and spends the tax money it collects, more than it is about taxing people, taxing businesses, etc. So I could be wrong, but at least not as a direct result of greater fiscal autonomy, I would say it's probably not likely. That is nevertheless the big consequence and positive for the Catalonian regional government, is that with more devolved autonomy, they essentially have greater oversight, greater control over their fiscal policy. And as a region that was a net contributor to this common fund, they'll now, in theory, have more money in the Catalan tax treasury, let's say, to be able to spend on public services and whatever it may be in Catalonia. As a result of that now creates a problem for the central government, who will now look at who is impacted by this. With devolved autonomy and paying a contribution via a third entity, the central government will have a deficit in its common fund that it will essentially need to fill as a result of Catalonia now having greater devolved tax autonomy. Now, despite there not being reports of how much the contribution that Catalonia will be expected to make to the common fund is, a study by FIDEA says that Catalonia will essentially contribute 60% less than it contributed in previous years as a result of now making a contribution to the third entity and having full fiscal autonomy. To give you an idea of how much that is, the Statistical Institute in Catalonia reported that in 2022, of the approximately 250 billion euros collected in tax revenue across Spain, Catalonia accounted for about 49 billion of that, which is about 20%. So if we do some quick math, 60% of 49 billion is about 30 billion euro deficit that's going to be created by Catalonia having regional tax autonomy. So that leaves the central government essentially with two choices to plug that gap. One is to increase central government taxes, so increasing the central government component rates of income tax, perhaps increasing other components, maybe VAT, to cover the shortfall. The other is to cut public services. And given that the latter would probably be a very unpopular move in Spain, I think I know which one I would expect. But then we've also got the other autonomous communities that are impacted by this decision as well. Remember when I mentioned about Catalonia having to contribute to the common fund, that this was contingent on the other autonomous communities having a similar level of taxation. And already, even before this whole devolution of Catalan fiscal policy came about, there's already some inequality in taxation across autonomous communities in Spain. The big standout one is the dispute between the central government and the Madrid government's stance on Madrid taxation. Whilst the central government, ran by the PSOE, attacks Madrid for its low rates of taxation and accuses it of fiscal dumping in Spanish, essentially being anti-competitive with the other autonomous communities by lowering taxes too far. The Madrid Autonomous Community, which is governed by the opposition party, the Partido Popular, People's Party in English, argues that the rest of Spain is a tax hell, essentially, and that through the autonomous community taxation law, it has the right to manage its taxes as it wants to. And who's to say that a situation like this won't give Catalonia a reason to argue against their contribution to the common fund if they're going to single out and put autonomous communities with low taxation in the spotlight? I don't know if it will really happen, but it's something that came into my mind as a possibility. What is almost certain though is that in the absence of being able to plug that deficit from Catalonia's fiscal devolution, that the other autonomous communities are going to have to make adjustments to their tax system one way or another, or their budgets and their public service spending. If there's less money in the common fund to be spread amongst autonomous communities, maybe some autonomous communities will look at raising their taxes as well in order to cover their regional budgets. Who knows? Some autonomous communities may also be upset by the fact that Catalonia is about to have a more devolved fiscal policy, and they may ask for the same in return, which would then create further tensions between the autonomous community and the central government. So you can see what an interesting and complex matter this is, and the range of possible consequences that could affect not only, the central government and Catalonia, but the rest of Spain as a result of this. I hope you enjoyed the video in any case, guys. Leave a comment and let me know what your thoughts are on this situation as well. And if you want to see more videos about Spain, then be sure to check out this video where I talk about how much income tax people pay by autonomous community in Spain. And if you're interested in some of the other news that's been happening in Spain, then be sure to check out this video where I talk about the cancellation of the Spanish golden visa through property investment. Till next time, I'll see you in the next one, and let's get this money.